right, and people are coming in. So welcome everyone who is hanging out in the waiting room for a few minutes as we were getting started. I have a fancy new background image. So if you've been to a Clear Admit event before, that's what we were working on. We had to approve my background photo that it looked nice with my shirt. So I think we got that all figured out. Hopefully the waiting room was fun tonight. I've been talking to the directors at Zoom, trying to get some cool music for you all in there, maybe like an activity. Don't know if that happened yet. So we're trying to get some like virtual fun while you're in the waiting room, or we'll just start on time next time. Either way, whatever works. So my name is Mike. While you're getting into the room, feel free to kind of pop into the chat, help me to make sure that it's working, and also just let us know, where are you joining us from, whether it's a city, a state, a country, a region, planet Earth, whatever it is. It's good for us to kind of see who has either woken up early, stayed up late, or is just kind of hanging out at the same time as us, like dinner time. I'm on the East Coast of the US, so it could be around that time for some folks as well. And here they come. So I see Colombia, I'll say it with a terrible accent, India as well, Seattle, Washington, Chicago, San Francisco, from China. So we do have people all hours of the day. I believe the folks in China and even India probably can tell us the future. So let us know how tomorrow's going for us. If there's any bets I need to make, whatever it is, just give me a heads up so we can be good. Nigeria as well. Thank you for getting up probably more the middle of the night for you. So appreciate that. And as that continues to come through, again, get familiar with the room. This is gonna be a really light, easy session with panelists from 3 great MBA programs that will speak to you about all the kinds of tips and tricks and things they ran into in the MBA application process. To get things started, again, my name is Mike. I'm with Clear Admit. Clear Admit is an MBA applicant resource community. We do all kinds of things to get folks ready for the MBA application process, such as events like these, but also things like our essay topic analyses, our interview archives, our Livewire decision tracker. Did any of the 3 of you use Clear Admit at all? And not to put you on the spot, but is it familiar at least? Alex shaking his head a little bit. So a little familiar, right? Okay, so it's a good resource. It's free to use. So check us out if you have not already. But that's really all we'll say about what we have going on. You can check us out at any time, clearadmit.com on the web. Tonight, we're going to focus on our panelists. And with that, I want to make sure we can introduce each of them. So if you can let us know your name, which school that you attend, even though we can see it all, but let's remind folks, in case they're on audio only, which school that you are either attending, and if you're a first year or second year. And we'll just start with that for now. And if you have any like interesting things, like anything else you want to add for the beginning, if not, we can skip over that part. So Al, we'll start with you.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Al Corvah. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a second-year student at Duke Fuqua, so I'm going to graduate in May. You'll hear more about my background and my journey over the course of the panel, but what I will say is that before I came to Fuqua, I was a bank branch manager for M&T Bank, also in Baltimore, and I decided to go to business school to transition to investment banking, and that's what I'm going to do after graduation.
Awesome. Great introduction. Perfect. Siddharth, you were here second, so I'll let you go second. We'll keep it.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. So my name is Sid, everyone. I go to UVA Darden. I'm a second year as well. And I'm originally from Mumbai in India. So long way from home.
Absolutely. Yes. I remember taking those flights when I was recruiting for business school, and I think I took a 15-hour flight from Newark, New Jersey, straight over to Mumbai and stayed awake to do an event. So it was quite the trip, but awesome place to go check out. So cool. Thank you for being here. And Alec, let's hear from you.
Hey everyone, my name is Alec. I attend Penn. I'm a second year as well. I deferred my admittance to Penn for a year. So if anyone has questions about deferrals or anything like that, I'm happy to answer.
Awesome. And thank you for being here as well. And I see a question in the chat already. So yes, we are recording this session. So if you need to pop off at any time to go do something else, we will be emailing the link out for the video at some point later this week. And as Alec mentioned with questions, right? So we do have some pre-submitted questions that came from all of you when you registered for this event. We have an agenda that we're going to work our way through to answer as many of those questions as we can. If you have new questions that you think of, feel free to populate the chat, or the Q&A box. I can't promise we'll get to every question, but we'll definitely try to tackle as many of the different topics as we can. With that, we can get started kind of way at the beginning when we think about, what was in that decision process when you wanted to go back to business school. And Al, you kind of alluded to how you were at M&T Bank and you decided you want to go into IB, and that may be part of what that decision was for you, right? So what were kind of the reasons, and we can start with you actually, that you initially just started to even think about business school in the first place?
Absolutely. Started with my career at M&T Bank. So first I can say I had an excellent 4 years working there. What happened is that, so my first year I went through the management development program, and then was promoted to assistant branch manager. And then sometime in 2020, right around the pandemic, I was promoted to branch manager. And I was looking at my future with the company. And a lot of the people in the company saw me as a star. They said, hey, you could be the first regional manager we had before the age of 30, all these other things. But then I realized what I liked about the job, being a bank branch manager, going out to the community, being in the sales force, all of those things, those would go away soon at the regional manager level. And that'd be mostly an administrative role. And that wasn't appealing to me. I thought that I would naturally hit a plateau in terms of personal and career development. So that's the reason why around that time I decided the following year, 2021, I'm going to apply to business school such that I may matriculate in 2022 and career switch into investment banking in 2024. Now, the reason why I wanted to go into investment banking was because going back to what I said about wanting to be in the sales force, being in relationship management, number one, the great thing about IB is that when you move through the ranks, especially when you get to the director or management director role, it does become a relationship management endeavor. And also I wanted to boost my analytical skills because being a bank branch manager, you see the introductions of income statements, the financial statements, but you don't really get deep into the details. So I thought it'd be a great career path. And I established my search for business schools from there. So I looked at some of the top schools for finance, Wharton, NYU, a few other institutions, but also an important part of my journey here is that I wanted to specifically go into investment banking in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I have a lot of family in New York, but at the same time, I know that as much as I love visiting New York, I wouldn't necessarily want to live there. And a lot of people don't know that Charlotte is the second biggest city in terms of financial assets under management. So I looked at Charlotte heavily and a lot of the schools in the South. So that's a big reason why I targeted Fuqua. It's the highest ranked school in North Carolina, but I also looked at schools like Darden in North Carolina regionally. So that was the impetus for why looking at business school and how I went about my search.
Really cool. Great answer. Very detailed. I like that there's representation from some of the other schools you considered on this panel. It's like we planted you here and said you're going to be perfect for tonight's session. No, but that's great. And yes, with Charlotte, I think Bank of America's headquartered there. There's a few other like really big time banks that are headquartered there as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Like Truist, for example. So the recent merger between SunTrust and BB&T, now it's the sixth biggest financial institution, also based in Charlotte. So yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Very good stuff. All right, Sid, how about for you?
Yeah, so my decision to, apply to business school was slightly similar, but I had like a different career trajectory. I worked across a number of different industries. In India, I worked in corporate strategy, worked in industrials. I then worked in apparel, retail, and textiles. And then I was an entrepreneur as well. So like really, I really was thinking about where I want to go next. And, is there a way to like tie up all of these things together and apply them? And I was doing a lot of businessy things in day-to-day life, but I never had any structure or framework to them. So I decided like, okay, I can take a step back and this is my time to go back to school. Ended up applying to a bunch of schools and I had like a little bit of a framework thinking about like what kind of experience am I looking for, what kind of recruiting outcome am I looking for, and where do I want to live for 2 years. So I wanted a slightly more academic experience. I'd been out of school for a while, so I wanted to like really get into it. I wanted to make a career pivot to management consulting, so Darden was one of the options there. And then lastly, I wanted to live in a smaller town because I came from a big city, which was Mumbai, and then I'll probably end up in a bigger city after graduation. So I really wanted 2 years to, slow down a little bit, enjoy life, and that's how I ended up picking Darden.
Very nice. Yeah, the hustle and bustle, get out of that, right? Get a little pause, relax, refresh. Awesome stuff. Alec, how about for you?
Yeah, when I was thinking about business school, I was kind of a little more senior in my career as an investment banker. I left as a VP of M&A, and at that point, I'd been working 4, 5, 6 years, 80 to 100-hour weeks, like I'm sure many of you do, just very long hours behind a keyboard, taking a lot of my meals behind my desk. And I was just thinking, I want to continue my career in finance. I do love what I do, but outside of my job, I've kind of forgotten the things that inspire me to keep going. If I want to work another 10, 15, 20, 30 years in finance, I thought it was important to really figure out who I am outside of the work, where my passions are, what I enjoy doing. And given that I've been working in investment banking my entire adult post undergrad life, I didn't really have a lot of time to figure that out. And so when I was thinking about where do I want to go to business school, I thought I want to go to a student run experience. I want to go somewhere where there's opportunity to meet someone who thinks directly opposite of how I think. I want to be around people who love doing the weirdest things, who love doing travel and scuba diving and polo and boxing. And I just want to experience life to the fullest, because as much as I hope to continue this kind of life post graduation, I just know I'm going to continue working. I'm going to work passionately, but there's not going to be a lot of time outside of that.
What are the weird things? Did you discover some of the weird things at Penn?
Yeah.
Suggestions?
One of my favorite experiences was I went surfing in the Outer Banks in North Carolina early on in the program. Developed a pretty strong passion for surfing and something called e-foiling, which I like to describe as motorcycling on the water. Essentially, you're on a motorized board. But we had one e-foil between the four of us who were on that leg of the trip, and while one person was e-foiling, the other three of us were tied together on our boogie boards, tied to a buoy in the middle of the ocean, just exchanging stories about the different things we've overcome in life. And I thought that was extremely meaningful to me. Outside of that, I'm the CFO of the boxing club. And there's just so many different things to do every random week of the day of the week.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fun things, and we were talking before the call a little bit with Al and I about going to the college basketball games at Duke and watching the Blue Devils play, and it's fun how like you're back at school again, right? So it's one of the things that people I think forget, because there are those kind of practical reasons to go back for an MBA. It's increase your career earnings, get a different job, learn something, right? Go back and get the education and training. But I think people forget there's like fun aspects of it. Like you're back on a college campus, you can join clubs and organizations, you can go on trips, you can go to the athletic events. Like it's an interesting piece of the whole thing that can be a lot of fun. So thanks for bringing that into the session tonight. So after making kind of like short lists and looking into applying, right, and looking at the schools, and you're all at fantastic schools, what was kind of like the single reason that you chose the school that you chose? And I guess it doesn't have to be single. Like if there was 3, 4, 5 reasons, that's fine too. But if you can kind of narrow it down, like what was like the thing that really sold you or really stood out to you about the school that you chose? I did have an answer one time on this panel that like someone said, "Oh, it was the school I got into, so I went," and that's fine too, right? But there was a reason you applied to that school. So like, what's bringing you to the schools that you're currently at that our attendees should know about? Sid, we can start with you for this one.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, like I was looking for a very specific experience, going in. So I was looking at schools which you have like a structured class regime, like, you actually go to class and make sure that you are participating and you go to class well prepared. I definitely did a lot of that in my first year. So Darden is known for its academic reputation, but how I ended up choosing essentially was based on the people I spoke to. Like that was just such a huge part of the process, because I connected with a few current students and alumni when I was applying to school, and just the way that they, welcomed me, even though I was halfway around the world, just, talking about stuff or thinking about the transition. really made that choice very easy for me. Like if I want to be in a part of a community where I was well supported and, people were really looking to pay it forward. And that's what ended up sealing the deal for me.
It's a great story. It's nice when you make friends before you're even there, right? You see people like yourself or that you could get along with, and it's like, oh, actually, I'll just go there and get along with that actual person, maybe. That's awesome. Alex, saw you pop off, so if you want to jump in.
Sure. Earlier, I alluded to looking at two groups of schools based on wanting to go to investment banking in Charlotte, the big finance schools and the great schools in the Southeast. But ultimately, there are two schools that I was truly passionate about, Wharton and Fuqua. Wharton because it's the marquee finance school, and Duke because it's the #1 school in North Carolina. Now, an important part of my legacy at M&T Bank is that there I got my Spanish to fluency. So because I was always working in Spanish speaking neighborhoods. So the program at Wharton I was specifically looking at was Wharton Lauder. A lot of you may be looking at that, may be familiar with it. It's the program where it's a joint MBA, MA program, and you can finish it in 24 months. You get to go to a certain region of the country. So I was thinking about going to Latin America, writing a thesis over there, and using my Spanish. But ultimately, the reason why I decided to look more at Fuqua came down to a few reasons. So first and foremost, I realized no matter where I end up, or I would want to go to investment banking in Charlotte, whether I graduated from Fuqua or Wharton. So I thought it'd be advantageous to go to a school that likely has more regional connections. Two, I thought if my main reason for going to Wharton would be the Lauder program and speaking Spanish in Latin America for a long time, it's like I don't necessarily need to pay for 2 degrees to do that. I don't have to write a thesis to do that. I can travel while I'm in business school, which is what I've done. So this past March, speaking of fun things, I went to Mexico City by myself, and it was a blast. And the third part of it was I had gone to an Ivy League school before. So I graduated from undergrad at Harvard. So I'm familiar with a lot of the cultural aspects of Wharton, going to school in the Northeast, going to an Ivy League institution. I wanted to try a different school, or a school with a different culture, one in another region of the country, and one that I saw as having a stronger sense of community with respect to sports and a more collaborative experience. And that's what I got when I talked to a lot of students at Duke. When I visited the campus, things of that nature. So ultimately, I thought from a personal development standpoint, from the regional aspect, Duke is the school to go to. So that's why I applied to early action 2 Octobers ago, and then was fortunate enough to get in.
Very cool stuff. I like that you pitched a different school. Al, you're crushing it. All right, Alec, what do you have to say?
Yeah. I had a few different reasons. I already mentioned the student-driven experience, so I'll incorporate that by reference. But on the academic side, I wanted the ability to take courses that would be really applicable to my future, but I didn't want my experience to be all about the coursework. And so when I was looking at the different course offerings across from schools, I noticed that Wharton has one of the most in-depth finance programs with some of the greatest specificity in the coursework. And so some of the courses I've taken that are very helpful despite having an undergrad degree in business, as well as a career in finance, included advanced topics in private equity. One of the professors is one of 4 executive committee members at Warburg Pincus. And so when I think about entering a career in private equity, you can't find a better leader than this individual. Valuation, which surprisingly taught me a good deal about valuation that just isn't applied in career. Finance of buyouts and acquisitions, finance of venture capital, and the list just goes on. And I think beyond just having a strong bench of professors, the ability to learn different areas within finance is kind of unparalleled at this school. But outside of that, I thought that in addition to the finance elements, I thought the legal elements were really important as well. I think that's one area that just isn't as commoditized in both investment banking, private equity, and other related fields. And so having the ability to come on, and Al mentioned the Lauder program, but we were also able to, within the typical degree, instead of doing a second or third major, we can get a master's degree from many different areas across Penn. And so I came in with a thesis that I would also get a Master of Law that would allow me to learn many of the legal aspects that would be directly applicable to private equity that many other individuals might not have.
It's an interesting way to kind of pile on, yeah, some different knowledge. I didn't realize they had a master's of law. I've always heard of the JD. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to be a practicing lawyer, but it would definitely give me just more knowledge than the average person.
absolutely. No, that's great. Yeah, I've only heard of more like public policy, like those types of like in that area, but this is that's interesting. Really cool stuff. So so you can see like right, so there's I'm noticing there's some commonalities with like meeting certain folks in the community that's on campus, but there's also some of those more kind of practical like what you would think, right? I'm going back to school. I have a purpose for going back to school. I chose the school because it fulfills that purpose. So I think it's nice to kind of hear all those different reasons. And is everyone happy with their choice? It's always like a tough question to ask, but everyone's like super, yeah, everyone's talking well about the school that they're at. So I'm assuming there's no regret, which is good. So going back and thinking through kind of when you first put your applications together, right? There's a question I always like to ask in these sessions, which is, you know, a lot of your MBA application makes you be very introspective about your career, your background, your accomplishments. Did any of you find it difficult to do that portion of the application to like really open up and put everything into your essays, put everything into your resume, tell your recommenders all the great things you've done? Like, did any of you find that to be kind of difficult to do at all? Yeah, Alec said, Alec, you can lead this one off then. Yeah.
Yeah, I found this incredibly difficult. I've always kind of thought of my accomplishments and the things I would say as kind of a resume, and I'm referencing a specific essay that Wharton has, the second essay for those of you considering the school. What will you contribute to the school? Whereas the first essay is what can you gain from the school? So it's targeting both sides. And on this second essay, I thought, you know, I know a lot of really amazing people. I know all about investment banking and some other resume-like achievements. But I think when I got to it, it was kind of an arrogant way to go about the essay, and that was just wrong, actually. To say that these qualities that I know investment banking, that I know these great people, make me stand out as an individual, it's not a unique attribute. Everyone, all of you likely as well, know amazing people, leaders of your firms, people that other people want to meet. That's not what makes me unique. And so when I really dug into it, I had to think about where's the white space in this school. You know, Wharton is a very large program. I think the average class size is about 900 students. It's a large program, but despite that, there's a ton of white space that only each of you can fill. There's something that only you can bring to the conversation or the skill set, and you have to really dig deep into what that is. And for me, it was, yes, I do know investment banking, but that's not enough. There's a lot of people who know investment banking. I had to think about what do I enjoy doing outside of career. And something I've done for the last 10 years is teach, whether in middle schools, high schools, coach debate. And so I think the teaching elements were really important to kind of who I am as not just an applicant, but a member of the community. And so I went forward and said, you know, I know a lot about business. I know a lot about the investment banking process, and I know how I can teach those elements to my fellow classmates. And I think that was a lot more impactful than I can bring XYZ person to the campus.
It's great. I love that. I love how you kind of figured out your space. And I like that kind of, you know, how you're thinking through it too. And I always tried to explain that to folks when they would ask me questions when I did admissions about, you know, I am an engineer and I went to this school, and so am I going to get in or not? And it's like it's not that simple. Like there's way more nuance to who you actually are, and you touch on a lot of that stuff. Like what else do you do? Like what do you do outside of the classroom? Who are you as a person? What are your values? What are you into? And that's how these cohorts are made, right? I mean, I'm sure although there's a lot of IB people that are there, they're not all like you. They don't look like you. They don't act like you. They don't do the same things. They're not interested in the same things. Yeah, it's interesting how you think of that. Sid, you were shaking your head yes before too. What do you think on this?
Yeah, kind of actually very similar to what Alex said. But to go back to your original question, Mike, I found it incredibly hard to, you know, introspect and really think about what you know, what I actually want out of this experience. Because you know, when you're working, you're just working and working and working. You're working really hard. You sometimes don't get really a lot of time to introspect and, you know, build that self-aware behavior. But this gave me a chance to do that. So like Alec, he was thinking about what made him different or what motivated him. I was thinking about like, what's the common thread which ties together all of my experiences that I've had so far in my life. Like really thinking back to like, my formative years, my childhood, undergrad, even after that, like, the choices that I made in my career, what was I really looking for and what was the common thread that I could pull on and sort of extend onto like, my business school experience and what post MBA career I wanted. And for me, it was a couple of different things, but one of it is like my brand of entrepreneurship and the kind of impact that I wanted to have wherever I was. So like if I was at a smaller organization, I could have a larger footprint in terms of impact. If I was a larger organization, I could have larger scale in terms of impact. But really thinking through like what motivated me and what drove me to make these decisions is what I tried to think about as I was applying to business school. And this was something that, helped me incredibly as I thought about what kind of career path I wanted through recruiting, business school, and all of those things. So that was just, I'm actually incredibly grateful for this entire thing that the application process taught me.
Isn't that funny? Like, would you have thought when you started the application journey, right, and you realized, wow, this is actually a lot of work? Did you think at that point, like, I'm gonna like this at the end? Like, probably not, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's like, yes, please, like, sign me up to do hours of essay prep and stuff. But it is amazing how many people who have gone through it, when they go back and reflect, and it takes a year or two, right, after you're done with it, like, put it away for a while. But it does, it helps you, and it helps you prepare for those kind of conversations, and you go right into recruiting right away. And now you also know yourself so well. So all of your stories for those kind of quick coffee chats with recruiters, like you almost practiced all that to get into the school you're at. So it helps you. Like if you're in the application process now, if you're attending this event, like dive in with 2 feet, your whole body, like go for it because it will help you in future conversations. Al, go ahead. What do you got on this?
Yeah, my perspective on digging into introspection and the difficulties of that is a little bit different from those of Alec and Sid in the sense that for me, I knew the story of why I wanted to go to business school, like what I just explained, and all of those connections very early on. So I had an easy time telling that. I had a strong record at M&T Bank, so I could speak to that. But there were two glaring insecurities from my perspective about my application. First and foremost is that I didn't see my background as sufficiently quantitative, and that before working at M&T, I studied political science. So I didn't study economics or a lot of these other quant-heavy disciplines that I thought a lot of the people who were applying and wanted to go to IB did. So I really tried to play up on the fact that I've done a lot of self-studying. I know being a bank branch manager isn't the most quantitative role, but here's how I have learned a little bit, et cetera. The other part of the application I really had to reflect on was explaining why I couldn't get my direct supervisor to write a recommendation. So as I explained at the beginning of this presentation, M&T really liked the work I was doing. They saw me as a rising star over there. So I really didn't want to go out and ask my boss to be one of my recommenders because I knew that they had a lot of plans for me. And not only would I derail those plans if I had told them outright, but it could actually hurt my career and that I could be given bad assignments, things of that nature. So I had to think to myself, do I take the risk and talk to my direct supervisor as to not raise any potential red flags by not having my supervisor be one of the recommenders? Or do I take a different route, pick my business banker, the person I went on business sales with, and my former boss, who was a mentor of mine who had left the company beforehand, and then prep them appropriately such that they could do a good job, or even I thought potentially a better job than my supervisor would. And ultimately, I chose the latter route. So I didn't have my supervisor write my recommendations, and I had those other two recommenders do it for me, and it all worked out. So ultimately, even though those two parts of the application were stressful for me, because I was able to defend those positions, so to speak, and the rest of my application was strong, I was able to make it through. So I think the takeaway there is don't be afraid to go a different route with respect to how you're pitching yourself for a certain discipline or who you get to write your recommendations, because there is a way, so long as you have genuine interest in a coherent story.
great. Yeah, and a great story because that does pop up, right? There's a lot of folks who I see that question a lot about. I don't know if I want to tell somebody I'm leaving for 2 years, right? So that's definitely, and it's great to hear a story of how you're able to navigate that and that it's possible, right? So I think that's all good to share. So thank you for that. I see a question that came in, which I think it kind of fits in right now, which is if you're okay with sharing, right? So I know this is like maybe personal, possibly for some of you, but how many total schools did you apply to? And in your mind, right? So this is a tough question, I think, too, because the second piece is how many were safety schools versus reach schools. That's tough to define for every applicant the same way. So maybe just kind of like how many did you apply to, and what was really the number that you really wanted to attend? I guess I'll leave it at instead of reach versus safety. And then would you have gone to business school if you did not get into one of those top choices? So we'll go that route. So Al, go ahead. You can kick us off. Sorry.
Yeah, so I ended up preparing applications for Duke it's funny, for these three schools that are on the screen right now: Duke, Darden, Wharton. Now I looked at other schools, but the only ones that I did fill out applications for were these three because I knew that I was applying to Duke early action. So it's like, hopefully I get into Duke. Hopefully I don't have to write up too many applications. The only two applications that I actually submitted were for Duke and Wharton. But as soon as I got into Duke, because it was early action, that was it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a different, and the EA process is different, right? And for folks on the call that don't understand, early action for the schools that offer it, which Darden offers as well, for the early action, if you get in and you choose the binding option, like you're expected to be attending that school. So it does change. It changes the math a bit, right, on how many schools you're going to apply to. Because if you're EA, you get in right away. Those applicants today would know if they're going to that school because both of those schools have already released their early action decisions, and we're only in October. So there are benefits to that. If you're a year out and applying and you're interested in those schools, consider those EA rounds because you could be done with this whole process in October, which is great. So that's great. So just wanted to make sure I explain some of the context of maybe why, you're going and you're done makes sense with that type of round available for you. So Sid, how about for you?
Yeah, very similar actually. I also applied to Darden EA, so I was also technically done by October. I did cast a slightly wider net because I had, a number of programs which fit my criteria. So I had, I think, submitted applications for 4 more schools, but I think I interviewed a couple of them. Maybe even got into one which had a rolling admission system. But as soon as I got into Darden and accepted the offer, I withdrew my applications from all the other schools because this is where I wanted to be.
There you go. Alec, how about for you?
Yeah, similar. I applied to 4 schools, and the way I just kind of thought about that was I looked at where my career was today and where I wanted to end up, and I just thought which schools would specifically let me do that. There are a lot of really good schools, and I think the number of schools you apply to should kind of reflect what those schools are able to help you do. Just given that time is probably the most limiting resource, you should probably cast a wider net if you can, just because you want to make sure you can get to business school and then that end goal career is as soon as possible.
Yeah, that sounds good. That all makes sense. And thank you for the question from our attendee who sent that in during the session. Good stuff. Did any of you, this is another pre-submitted question, did any of you use any assistance on your application process? And the question came in specific to admissions consultants. But I'll expand that out because maybe just answer it more broadly if you had anybody kind of help you. And I know sometimes applicants will say they even did interview prep with their roommate, or they found a small group of other applicants at their place of work and kind of shared some thoughts on the essays, right? So any thoughts on that and kind of like who was involved in your process, and did you find that helpful? And do you think it helped you get into the schools that you went to? Honestly, I don't know who wants to go first on that or if anybody wants to take that one, but yeah, Alec, go ahead.
I can start on this. I'd say I used 3 buckets of assistance in helping me with the application.
That's fair. Yeah.
I did use a consultant. I used a friend who was actually a first year here, which was very, very nice. And then I use some of the school resources, particularly around Wharton's interview process, which is a little unique. If anyone has questions, I can touch on that. But the way I thought about the consultant versus the friend was that a consultant is extremely good at kind of helping you draft an essay that kind of meets the expectations of what the school wants to see. But on the other hand, the consultant can't make up the story for you. And so when I was going through the essay writing process, I wrote down the different ideas I had, and my consultant was very useful in saying that this is a really strong way to position your essay uniquely based on that fact pattern. But when I went to my friend, she said, these are the things that make you unique. And so just making sure that you have both elements of that is extremely important, because you can have the most well-crafted essay, in my opinion, but if it doesn't really position you uniquely and as an important member of the upcoming class, it could be the best written essay in the world. It still may not be enough. And then I did the team-based discussion interview prep with some of the groups that Wharton provides. A lot of the clubs, especially if you're, say, a veteran or part of a certain affinity group, they'll host mock interviews that you can get a sense of how the actual interview will go.
And Alec, we can stick with you because the question did come in, as you alluded to. And what is the interview process like? It is the team-based discussion. Wharton invites just went out yesterday, so there's a lot of people probably itching at what are they in for here. So go ahead and give us a quick little update.
Sure. The team-based discussion, I think, is part of what makes Wharton's community so powerful. And just to say, like, what it kind of solves for, I think, is a community that's actively helping to help each other out, to act in a very humble and supportive manner, a no arrogance kind of mindset of, hey, I want to meet you and I want to learn about what you've done, rather than I want to talk about me so you can know what I've done. The way the TBD works is about a week in advance of the actual interview itself, the school will hand out a basic assignment saying that the school wants to do this new venture, solve for this problem. Here's the problem at large, and here are 2 different objectives. And so you come up with a plan of how you're going to solve for that objective. And then you go into a interview. From now on, I think we're doing these over Zoom, but historically they've been in person. And you'll be in an interview setting with 5 other candidates. So a group of 6 plus 2 admissions fellows. And so what are they trying to solve for in this team-based discussion? Is it who comes up with the best idea? No. Is it who talks the most and who is able to contribute the most to the end plan? No. It's, are you as an individual able to work together with these 5 other individuals to come up with a plan that is both collaborative and effective? Or are you someone who is better working in a more siloed setting? And just given that Wharton is an inherently collaborative setting, it really does seek to solve for that collaborative element.
Thank you. It's a great help. And so, Alan, Sid, if you answer the other question, I will allow you to be fair with equal time to also give any tips and tricks about the interview process at your school as well. So the original question on, did you use any assistants, right? Again, it could be a consultant, like a professional assistant, a friend, a colleague. Go ahead, Sid.
Yeah, sure. So I also used an admissions consultant. But for me, it was basically around, I didn't come from a career path that traditionally sent a lot of people to top business schools in the US. So I didn't have a frame of reference so as to speak to like what it should look like. So for me, it was really like making sure that what I was writing about myself met the standards of what are expected from a business school essay. Like it was as simple as that. And also like getting an objective outsider edit or opinion on what I thought was a brilliant essay may not be the case. So that's something that obviously I valued a lot. And yeah, I think that was pretty good in terms of, understanding what it means. There are lots of cultural nuances as well. Certain cultures downplay certain parts of your work and the things you do and your life. In certain cultures, like the US, for example, it's very okay and expected to like weave in a bit of personal details, talk about your accomplishments a lot more than you do in some other cultures. So really making sure that I was hitting all those nuances and meeting the standards of admissions was something that I used a consultant for, and I was super grateful that I did. And taking you up on that offer for the interview piece, Darden also does interviews slightly differently in that they are blind, like they're completely blind. So your admissions interviewer, if it's an admissions committee member or a second year here at Darden, they will not have access to your resume. They will not have access to your application package. They only know your name. And what that does is that flips the onus on you to really tell your story during the interview process. So it's also a little bit more interviewee driven. As you're really talking about your story, you're given opportunity to talk a little bit longer than you would while interviewing with some other schools. But the blind piece is something that catches a lot of people by surprise. And that's something you should be mindful of if you're preparing for a Darden interview.
Yeah, thank you for that tip and using that key phrase. I think right that blind interviews. So I think that's it doesn't mean they're not going to look at you. It means they're not going to know who you are before you arrive, like a blind date, right? You show up, you still get to interact with the person. You just not going to know who it is till you show up there. So yeah, that's a key thing, and great tips, awesome stuff, and also good for the other thing because you touched on something else with moving to a new country, right? Which is something that not everybody on this panel is going to do, but a fair amount are doing that or looking to do that, I guess, the attendees. So kind of using that culture coach in a sense is a great idea and a great way to think about, how do you frame yourself in the essays, in your resume. I mean, that's a whole nother dimension of thought that you've kind of brought into this, Sid. So I appreciate that. Did that help you? Do you really feel like those differences like kind of set you apart from other applicants from your region? Like, is that?
I mean, I only know what worked for me, and
Sure.
clearly it worked well. So yeah,
Good enough. That's
absolutely.
all. Yeah, that's a fair answer. That makes sense. You don't know everybody in India, right? Yeah. I would be very difficult to know that. There's a billion people. Okay, so Al, for you, same thing. Again, reminder on the question is more about did you use any assistance or help or get tips in the process from anybody close to you? And then if you want to give any tips on the Fuqua, I said it right for the first time ever. Interview process. Had to
Uh,
think about it.
First and foremost, for the consultant piece. Now, a lot of my classmates still think I'm a madman for not doing this, but I did not use a consultant. I didn't have anyone else look at my essays. It goes back to my philosophy regarding something that Alex said earlier, which I think was spot on, that ultimately it's about the narrative that you put in and what makes your application unique. Nobody can contribute that but you. As I've said throughout this panel, I had thought about the reasons why I wanted to apply to Fuqua specifically and business school in general for so long that I believed in my narrative and I had faith that whatever I would put together. So for Duke's essays, that's 25 special things about you. And the other part of that is how can you see yourself contributing to the Duke community? I thought I could give solid answers to that. And from a cost benefit analysis, a consultant wasn't going to add all that much to my application. And for anyone who's considering using a consultant, not using one, what I can say from my experience is not only did I get in from early action, but I was given a full scholarship. And to this day, a lot of people in admissions, they'll come up to me, they'll be like, oh, you're Al Corvah? Oh, we remember you. That was a great application you put together. That's part of the reason that they sent me over here. So ultimately, using a consultant has a lot of benefits, but if you believe that you have a strong enough narrative, don't feel like you have to employ one to not only get into a school, but under great conditions. Now, with respect to the interview process, I actually have an inside track to this because I am a student interviewer. I'm what we call an admissions fellow at Fuqua. So I currently interview people who are applying to the program. Ours is very conventional. Our process is we get the resume and the name of the individual. We don't get GMAT, GPA, they tell us specifically not to evaluate the candidates on the academic merits. So we don't do that, but ultimately you will get asked questions with respect to your views on leadership, your views on teamwork, what the mantra Team Fuqua means to you. I talked about how Fuqua is all about collaboration, and the spirit of that is encapsulated in that term Team Fuqua. Another aspect of the program that you'll want to study up on is DQ, decency quotient. So you've got EQ, which is emotional quotient, how you relate to people. IQ, which is general intelligence. And then what we say DQ is in a nutshell, the desire to do good. Because the idea is there are a lot of great leaders in the past who have had high EQ and high IQ, but have used it toward more malicious aims. But that DQ is what makes someone truly a good leader. So if you can reflect on your overall story with respect to how you work in a team, how you plan to be a leader, how Fuqua could augment your skills in both areas, and what being decent means to you, what DQ means to you, then you're going to have a great interview process.
I would need a lot of time to reflect because DQ in my area means Dairy Queen, and they have delicious Blizzard Sundays and stuff. No, that's interesting. It's and awesome that you have the perspective of a student interviewer, also someone who has gone through the interview process, so kind of seeing it from both sides. And we'll be on the lookout for Al Corvah, the admissions consultant, taking new applicants any day now, because looks like you got that all figured out, which is awesome. Let's see. So, and I kept checking down here because I'm waiting for somebody to ask like a Duke specific question, knowing now that you actually do the interviews, but the attendees are being nice, so we'll let that slide for now, because I'm sure they'll be like, tell me how to get in, which you can't do. So. Okay, let's see. So any other questions in the chat here? I mean, there's an interesting one about just how critical do you think your test score was to being admitted, which I think is kind of fair. And I'll expand that, right? Like, do you think there's any one aspect that really said, like, this is why I got in? Or do you think it's more kind of a variety of different factors that may have helped you? And obviously, if test score is that one thing, then you can answer yes to that question. But I think I know what the answers will be, but I'm curious what you think. And you also could just say, I don't know, which is a very fair answer because you might not know. I mean, they chose you to get in and you're in, and who cares, right? Doesn't really matter. So
I can say in my case, so for Fuqua, I'll say my GMAT was a 760. So that is the cutoff for top 1%. And Fuqua's, I don't know what the average was for last year, but I remember for the class that was admitted before mine, the average was 720. So I say for mine, it was instrumental in getting in the sense that if you can increase the average GMAT score, which I have mixed feelings about this, but the GMAT does have a high amount of weight with respect to the overall prestige in the school rankings, you're in. Or not necessarily you're in, but like you have a much higher chance in the sense that the first time I took it, I got a 720. Second time I got a 760. I took it twice. If the difference between 760 and 720 is a huge deal, if not for admission, probably for things like scholarships and other aspects of the application process.
yeah, good answer, fair answer. Anybody else take whatever test you did take more than one time? Sid you took it once or not take a test?
No, I took it once. Was lucky enough to get a good enough score. But going back to your original question around how it pans out, I think that there's just so many data points that they have in a candidate, and a GMAT score is one of them. It's for sure the most easily quantifiable one. But definitely I feel like it's a more holistic evaluation process.
Cool. Alec, any thoughts on this one? Yeah.
I kind of want to answer a slightly adjacent question.
Sure.
I'd say that exactly as Sid said, the GMAT is one element in a broader application. And to Al's point, like it definitely is one of the few elements you can control today. And so to the extent you can get a higher score, I believe you should. But I think the most important element is like how interesting is your voice? How is it going to add to the upcoming class? And so one thing I really like to say is that there are a lot of people who come from banking, consulting, similar backgrounds. And I think that's very much a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I'm not part of the admissions team, but if I was thinking from admissions seat, If I want to add, if I have 10 bankers or whoever admitted, I say banker because I was a banker. If I have 10 bankers, do I want to hire an 11th banker, or do I want to hire maybe a pharma person or an engineer, or someone who just comes from a very different background and has something unique to add? And so, GMAT is important, but I think being able to convey a strong story is also important. And so, if you have all those other great things, but you just can't get your GMAT score up, maybe it's just you're not the best test taker. I wouldn't say that prevents you from applying.
All great stuff and good. There's different perspectives. And that's a tough question to answer, I think, in general. So I appreciate you all giving a really good attempt at answering a tough question, a difficult question. Okay, so let's see. This is an interesting one too, just because we have mentioned kind of the collaboration that's at all three of your schools actually, and how that's kind of part of the culture. So I think this is an interesting one to answer, and it could be hard or easy, I'm not sure, but how do you kind of manage the fact that you have this collaborative culture, it's a team atmosphere, you're all in this together, but at the same time, you're all trying to get similar jobs potentially, or meet with the same people, or use the same resources, right? So do you ever have a difficult balancing act in that sense of like being friendly and collaborative with your classmates, but also kind of like, I have to do better than them on this interview, or does that not really happen too much?
I'd love to take a first stab at this.
Yeah.
I think one of my first experiences at Wharton made me believe that's a definitive no to that question. There is no trade-off. I went to this Blackstone event and I was coming in a little late. I saw one of my friends who I'd only spoken to once before, talking to someone I assumed was a fairly senior individual. I poked him on the back of the shoulder and he turned around. I asked, like, just who is this person so I can enter the conversation? And he was like, Alec, look, this is a guy named Lambert Zhang, one of the best people I know here. And he was like, this guy is so-and-so. This is what he leads at Blackstone. This is what he really likes to talk about. This is why he doesn't like to talk about. In that moment, he was giving me all of the different elements I needed to successfully talk to this individual, have a great reputation with him, and potentially get the job he was after. So I'd say that, yeah, there's a lot of people going after very similar positions, but the culture here is such that the best thing that could happen is, yes, I get that internship, but the second best thing is my friend can get that as well or instead. And so, yeah, there is a certain element of there's only so much opportunity, but I think we as a community do everything we can to spread the wealth.
Great answer.
Yeah, and what I'll say about that is going back to Duke's ethos, the idea that one person's gain in recruiting is at the direct expense of a classmate is very anti-team Fuqua. We're very much against that. I can say during my recruiting process, with the overall investment banking group, we would always exchange contact information with the MDs that we met, the vice presidents that we met, so we could all follow up with the appropriate people and get with the right groups. Another way that we saw it was that you can't look at things as a zero-sum game, and that there are a lot of banks, they'll have a set number of positions. It's very possible that you and your entire cohort can get a position if everyone does things right and helps each other with respect to technical preparation and behavioral preparation. I mean, last year, 85% of us who wanted to get into investment banking got positions. And with that other 15%, I don't think it was because, matter of fact, I know for a fact it wasn't because someone elbowed them out. It's because they weren't adequately prepared. So ultimately, I'd say my experience was very similar to Alex in the sense that I saw everyone, not only in the overall group, but the group of us, the small group of us who wanted to go to Charlotte as a partner in this. And we all celebrated each other as if it was ourselves getting our position when that time came.
It's awesome. Sid, anything to add or yeah?
Completely echo both the things that Al and Alec have said. Very similar to my experiences here as well. Like recruiting is a busy time. You have like overlapping events. Sometimes you're shuffling in and out of multiple events and stuff like that. So like you always have someone like Alex said, just like, tap on the shoulder and like, hey, what's going on? Just fill me in, and you get like a complete, concise rundown, and you can like use that, the very next moment. So that's something I've seen happen so many times during my time here at Darden, and just recognizing that a lot of these post MBA jobs are also team sports. And a lot of recruiters are also screening for that. They want to see how well you're working with other people as well. So that's also something that you need to keep in mind as you're going through this process.
All great answers and all things that I have heard as well. So yeah, I think it's similar to getting into schools, how, I mean, we're all doing this right now to kind of give people some tips and helpful advice on kind of how to proceed forward with applying to schools. And you know, you're all going to be competing for spots at these schools or other schools that you apply to, and we're all here hoping we all get in, right? So I think it's the same way, you know, that next step is the internship, the next step is the job afterwards. And you know, it's rankings, right? So like if everybody's getting jobs and the placement rate's high, everybody wins, right? So I don't think you want to tear somebody down. You want to help them out because then the value of your degree goes higher, everything goes higher. So all boats rise, right? So, so with a couple minutes left, there's a nice question we always kind of like to end on. And thank you all for everybody who's been submitting questions. We were trying to get to as many as we could, or at least ones that we can overlap. Again, if we didn't get to it, sometimes it's just too personal of a question or just doesn't really fit just yet into what we're talking about. So thank you, and come to a future event and maybe we'll be able to answer it there. Or, you know, look up some folks online, contact the schools directly. I think there were some questions in here that none of us in this room right now can answer, but the schools directly can. So definitely reach out to admissions. They're nice people. They will answer your questions. But the one to end on, and we'll go around to all three of you, is, you know, think about if you were at this event as an attendee, listening to a panel of people who are at the schools that you're at. What's a really nice kind of piece of advice that you can leave people with as they go on this application journey and hopefully end up in your shoes again in a year or 2 years from now? So what's the big thing you wish you knew then that you know now that you can pay it forward? So Al, go ahead.
Yeah, something that would have saved me a lot of time and probably would have led me to Duke earlier would be, don't feel like there's a school that you have to go to, in the sense that there's a lot of information about preconceived notions about specific brands of schools, but really you don't know what school is best for you until you dig deep inside of yourself and think about what you want that destination to be after grad school. What do you want as soon as you get out? What do you want 5 years from there? And then you can determine what's best. Because if I had just gone with the conventional, I would have gone to the fine school in Philadelphia, Wharton. But thinking more about what I wanted specifically out of my career in life, Duke to me was the best choice. And every day I'm thankful that I made it. So never feel pressured to go in one direction because you feel like you have to.
I love that. Yeah, make your own list, right? Your own criteria, your own methodology of which schools make the most sense to you. I think that's a great way to approach it. Yeah, that's awesome. Sid, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say just two quick things. One is start early. If I could, I would have given myself a bit more time when I was thinking of applying to business school. And the second one is like very similar to what Al said, is that remember why you're doing this, because you know times are going to be hard. Not everything is going to go your way through this entire process. So just remember what is the end goal that you are going towards. And you know, ultimately, yes, business school is great. It's a great experience, but you know, very crudely, sometimes it's a means to an end, and just make sure that you keep the end in mind as well.
Good stuff. I like that. How much time did you give yourself? Just curious.
I was quick. I started in March of 2021, and you know, did the GMAT in July, applied in September, was done in October. So like that was like very quick for me.
6 months. Yeah, that's okay. Good stuff. Yeah, I was just curious to see what you meant. All right, awesome. Thank you. Alec, go ahead, bring us home.
Yeah. This is a little more forward looking, but something I wish I knew when I started the program. You know, be very mindful and deliberate about why you want to go to business school. Because once you get here, it's kind of too late to start thinking about why you want to get here. Every week of your MBA program is 1%. It goes by so quickly. It's wild to think I have 3/4 of about a semester and a half left of the program. And there's no lack of opportunities here. The biggest skill I think I've developed here is learning when to say no to a beautiful opportunity, because there's just so many things to do and only so much time you have.
Time, man. The only can't get that back, right? So yeah, that's awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear about the opportunities, that there's just a lot going on and you're back at school and it's fun and you're all gonna end up in a good place. There's somebody, one of the vice deans I worked for when I was working in admissions said to me, yes, it's a sales role. You're selling people to come to your school and you're trying to win them over and not have them go to a different school. Like you want them to come here, but you don't have to feel like you're a used car salesman or one of those kind of things, because education's a noble good, right? So you can only benefit by going back to school. And it sounds like the three of you have kind of taken that wholeheartedly. So that's awesome to hear. So thank you all for all of your answers tonight, all of your help and advice, and providing all of your time, as we just said. Invaluable how much the time as a resource is. So I appreciate the hour that you gave us to provide our audience with answers to their questions. And for those of you who attended this event, thank you so much. I hope you learned something. I know I definitely did. Check out the video and we post it live later this week. And we'll catch you all at the next ClearMit event at a time and date to be determined soon. So thank you all again so much, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you all.